Welcome, everyone. Especially to those of you who may have just arrived in the sanctuary. You missed all the announcements. What can I say? Maybe next time. Also, welcome to those of you that have invited us into your home through the technology of live streaming. It is very much appreciated that I know that you're out there and that you're connected with the community that is in here today. So thank you very much for being there. Now, I already met one first-time visitor. Are there any other first-time visitors that are here for the very first time today? Hey, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Reverend Dusty Ripplemeyer, and I am the senior minister of this really wonderful, amazing, warm, brilliant, intelligent, dare I go on, community. Beautiful, yes, beautiful. Absolutely. So just welcome, everyone. I know that there's many different things that you could be doing on a Sunday morning, but I'm really happy that you've chosen to join us this morning.
The reading for today is from Ernest Holmes. He says, the law of mental equivalence means that everything that is consciously and subjectively embodied in our thinking tends to radiate an atmosphere, a vibration, a current of thought, an inward acceptance which automatically attracts to itself that which is like itself. The law of mental equivalence means that there shall be within the body of our thinking not only an acceptance of the good we desire, but an inward experience of the meaning of that good, a real sense and a feeling that we now possess it.
So, as Michelle mentioned, the theme for the month of May is spiritual laws and how we use them. And my talk title today is the law of mental equivalence, or the law of magic wands, as Michelle would say. So the title really implies, right, that the law that we're talking about today is the law of mental equivalence. And you heard Ernest say in the reading that was read that the law of mental equivalence means that everything that is consciously and subjectively embodied in our thinking tends to radiate an atmosphere, a vibration, a current thought, an inward acceptance which automatically attracts to itself that which is like it. That's really good news. Now, mental equivalents are simply the mental image or the mental version of our desires. They are the thoughts and the images that we create our lives from. Emmett Fox created the term mental equivalence, and the underlying truth is that anything that we want, whether that's a healthy body or a job that we love, or really wonderful, loving friends, or financial freedom, or unlimited possibilities, then we must furnish a mental equivalent of that. Emmett Fox says, supply yourself with a mental equivalent and the thing must come to you. Without a mental equivalent, it will not come. It's as simple as that. Now, if you have been here for any length of time, you will have heard this idea again and again. The idea that which we think about tends to become the experience of our lives, but we don't very often talk about the mental equivalent itself. So the bottom line is that everything that we see or feel on the material plane is but the expression of a mental equivalent that we hold in our consciousness. Now, this is true for all of us, both individually and collectively. Race consciousness, which, if you've never heard the term, is the collective thoughts of all people everywhere throughout all of time. And race consciousness has at any given time a prevailing mental equivalent, which will also then outpicture in the collective experience of our lives. And that collective experience, whatever that experience is, will remain the collective experience until the prevailing mental equivalent has shifted. So in order for the collective experience to change, the mental equivalent, the prevailing mental equivalent, must change. So for example, think for a moment about war as the mental equivalent held by the human race. Emmett Fox says, and don't, hear this, but don't beat yourself up about this. The human race has believed that you can enrich yourself by taking something belonging to somebody else. It has believed in death. It has believed in lack. It has believed that aggression pays and helping yourself to other people's things is a good policy. We have all believed this to some degree or another. The natural result of this has been to precipitate in the outer a picture of war, death, suffering, and so on. Because humanity has had the mental equivalent of war, the war came. And the war will continue to be until the prevailing mental equivalent is not of war. It's just the way it works. So today's reading said, everything that is consciously and subjectively embodied. Now this means both consciously and unconsciously. So while we are typically aware of our conscious thoughts, we all have a content of unconscious thoughts, of unconscious expectations, of unconscious judgments, and of unconscious frustration, fear, worry, doubt, and yes, desire. This is just as much a part of this process of thinking as the conscious words that we use. The law, these unconscious thoughts are just as much operated upon by the law as our conscious thoughts. The law can only ever say yes. It doesn't decide which ones it's going to manifest or not. It can only say yes. So it doesn't make a difference to the law whether they're conscious or unconscious. So this is why our invitation has always been to become aware of our thoughts, both our unconscious thoughts and our conscious thoughts, to do the inner work to be able to uncover our unconscious thoughts in order to be able to make a conscious choice in the building of our mental equivalents. In order to do this, we have to be aware of our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. These thoughts, feelings, and beliefs make up our mental equivalent, some of which serve us quite well, some of which not so much. The secret of successful living is to be able to build up the mental equivalents that we really want and to be able to get rid of the mental equivalents that we do not want. So how can we get rid of the mental equivalents that we do not want? Now in fact the only way for us to be able to get rid of a mental equivalent that we do not want, that is no longer serving us, is that we have to supply the opposite mental equivalent. It has to really be just the opposite. And so the invitation is to not dwell on negative things, thoughts, ideas, feelings, or beliefs, but to instead replace them with positive, constructive things, thoughts, ideas, feelings, and beliefs. Ernest Holmes says this is sometimes a long and arduous process, for a person does not change all of the thought patterns of his or her thought in a moment. Rather, it takes place little by little until gradually the old thought patterns become transformed into new ones by some inner alchemy of the mind. Abracadabra. the operation of which we do not see, but the manifestation of which we experience. So this can be a little tricky. For example, if I am unemployed and I want to get a job, I cannot think about the fact that I do not have a job. I cannot think about where is the money going to come from to pay the bills. I cannot think about my age, about my gender, about my level of education, or about the lack of experience that I think I have. I can't think about anything that is in resistance to the creation of a mental equivalent of being gainfully employed in a job that I absolutely love. Think about it. If I'm thinking about anything else other than my right and perfect place of employment, I am thinking about lack and limitation. And I am really, literally strengthening my mental equivalent of unemployment. Yes? Now, let's say that I have the belief that God is my infinite supply, and that I am always in my right and perfect place in my life. This is the truth that I know to be true, and this is the prayer that I am praying. And then someone comes along and they ask me if I've gotten my new job yet. And then all of a sudden I'm off and running, going on and on about how the bills are not being paid and nobody wants to hire a woman of my age, and besides of which I don't have enough education and I don't have enough experience. Have you been there? Yes, so where is my attention in that moment? What is the mental equivalent that I am holding in my consciousness, and what will be outpictured in my life? Just asking. I have another example for you. So that you don't have to sit there like feeling all like you're the only one who ever does this. So some of you may know and some of you don't know that I'm experiencing something called Dupuytren's contracture in the palm of my right hand. Now, a couple of months ago, I had a procedure to reduce the contracture, and the hand is better. It's healing. And yet, as I was preparing for this message this morning, I really was looking back over the last couple of weeks, and I heard myself saying something like, well, yeah, it's okay, but it's not exactly how I want it to be. I still, don't have full range of motion, and this really lump of contracture right down here by the base of my fingers, like really unsightly. I don't like it. Now, on one hand, no pun intended, I know that right where I am, God is as the essence of wholeness. I know that the blueprint of perfection lies just beyond this physical body in form. Well, maybe two on the outside part. I know that God is in the procedure, and I know that the wisdom of God flows through my doctor. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I have everything within me to heal this experience. And yet, I found myself, as I thought back over those couple of weeks, remembering a number of times when I turned away from that new mental equivalent and I turned back towards the limitation that I was experiencing. Remember, I said that there was a simple way to let go of our old, worn-out mental equivalents. I didn't say that it was always going to be easy. But the good news is that I'm aware, right? I'm aware, and that awareness is the beginning of the healing. Now, the bottom line is that we have to change our thought, and then we have to keep it changed. And when we change our thought and we keep it changed, then the condition will change accordingly. So the invitation is to take our circumstances, take our problem, take our situations, and to change our minds concerning it, and then to keep it changed. So having a strong mental equivalent of what we want, and then holding on to that mental equivalent regardless of what conditions and situations are showing up, we must sooner or later manifest that new mental equivalent if we remain singularly focused. We already have a mental equivalent for everything in our lives right now. Everything has a mental equivalent. It first was thought up in our mind and then is outpictured in our experience. So we have to be willing to consistently turn away from the mental equivalents that are no longer working, and then to build a new mental equivalent to take its place. So how do we build those new mental equivalents? Now we build the mental equivalent of what we want by thinking quietly, constantly, and persistently about the kind of thing that we want. Emmett Fox says that this kind of thinking has two very important components. The first is clarity, and the second is interest. Clarity and interest. We have to think with clarity, and we have to think with interest. Now, the law of mental equivalence says that the mental equivalent with the most feeling behind it is the mental equivalent that will be made manifest in our lives. So this is what Emmett Fox is referring to when he talks about interest. We build a mental equivalent for what we want in our lives by getting interested in it. The invitation is to think about what we want, to really feel it way down deep in our whole body, in our whole mind and our whole spirit. Everything participate in the feeling of it. Mary Mann Morrissey would say that to put on the coat of the person who already has the thing, or who is already doing the thing that we want to have or that we want to do. Ernest Holmes talks about feeling as the fuel that ignites our demonstration, and Abraham would say that we have to be a vibrational match for that which we desire. So when we are building a mental equivalent, we are encouraged to think about that which we desire in such a way as to inspire faith, to inspire joy, to inspire gratitude, or to inspire love. To think about that mental equivalent in such a way that we inspire the emotion that we wish to experience the moment that our demonstration is made manifest. You know that feeling that just comes up like, woo, finally. That feeling. We can visualize, or we can imagine, or we can plan, or we can even pretend, but the invitation is to do it with feeling, to do it with interest. Ernest Holmes said in the reading for today, the law of mental equivalence means that there shall be within the body of our thinking not only an acceptance of the good we desire, but an inward experience of the meaning of that good, a real sense and a real feeling that we now possess it. So the invitation really is to accept and to surrender to that emotion, and then let that have its way with you. Let that work its magic. The other component is clarity. Now, for each of us to build a mental equivalent of what we want, the invitation is to get the thought of what we want as clear as possible. To really just get it as clear as possible. Now, those of you that have been around the center for some period of time have probably heard a number of different ways to do this, and some people say that you should get really very, very specific, and other people say, no, stay really general. Now I'm going to add what Emmett Fox says to the mix, because Emmett Fox says to be definite, but not too specific. I kind of feel like Goldilocks. I'm trying to find just something like right in the very middle. But he says to be definite but not too specific. If we want a new house, or we want a new car, or we want a new job, the invitation is to be clear about the kind of car, the kind of house, or the kind of job that we want, and then to build the mental equivalent that matches that, but to not be too specific. So for example, if I am living in an apartment, but I want to be living in a house in the country, a house with 3 bedrooms, a house with lots of windows, a house with a fireplace and a porch and a garage, then that is the mental equivalent of that house that I want to build. But don't be too specific about it. So don't say, I want it to be the one at 257 Kildare Farm Road, for example. The invitation is to not say, I want it in the way that I want it, and I want it right now. So the invitation is to be open to a higher idea. The law of mental equivalence asks us to take our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs out beyond what we believe is actually possible for us in this moment, and then to stay in that consciousness. The invitation is to think about it like a muscle that we're trying to stretch. It might feel awkward, might feel even a little phony, might feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but just like the muscle, it will begin to stretch. And our consciousness can do that very same thing. It will begin to stretch. So and over time we will begin to believe in the vision. We will be able to believe in the mental equivalent. And then when we do that, then that is when it is made manifest in our lives. Now, as I think about this idea, I think about the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers had a mental equivalent of human beings being able to fly. Now, at the time, the prevailing race consciousness was that was impossible. Now, it would have been easy for Orville and Wilbur to really simply agree with the conventional wisdom at the time, but they had a vision. President John Kennedy took this mental equivalent one step further when he said, we will put a man on the moon in 10 years. Now, at the time, there was not the technology for that to be able to happen. But he had a vision. The Wright brothers and President Kennedy each had a mental equivalent that they firmly believed in. And now look at how we travel now. Look at how far we have come since that time. As I think about this idea, I think about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He had a dream. He had a vision of the world that he wanted to live in, a world in which everyone was equal. Now, he saw beyond the reality of the time, and he saw, felt, heard, lived, and breathed that vision that was in his mind. He had a mental equivalent that he kept alive despite what was happening all around him. Now, while we still have far to go regarding his mental equivalent of a world that works for everyone, the civil rights movement had far-reaching effects. Neuroscience has proven that we change our brains just by thinking differently. So when we are truly focused and single-minded, the brain does not distinguish between the inner world of our consciousness and the external world of form. Through the concept of rehearsing our mental equivalents, our brains rewire to really reflect our intentions, to reflect our mental equivalence. Dr. Joe Dispenza says, when we change our minds independently of environmental cues and then steadfastly insist on an ideal with sustained concentration, the brain will be ahead of the actual experience. In other words, the brain will function as if the experience has already happened. Be interested. The bottom line is that when we turn away from our old mental equivalents, we open ourselves up to a new idea, a new idea that we have never thought about in exactly that way before. That when we think a new idea and build a new mental equivalent, then we change the experience of our lives. The more we think about and the more we actually live in the experience of our new mental equivalent with steadfast conviction, the more we are able to rely on its manifestation. When we have a big enough vision, when we have a large enough mental equivalent for our lives, we engage spiritual forces, spiritual laws, spiritual principles that conspire on our behalf. There really is nothing that we cannot do, be, or have. The invitation around any idea that we wish to embody is that we think about it, that we envision it, and that we feel it to the depths of our soul with steadfast conviction, never turning away, singularly focused. And as we accept this consciously and we let it sink down into the depths of our subconsciousness, we will, in Ernest Holmes's words, have arrived at the mental equivalent of the idea. Please repeat after me. There is a law of mental equivalence, and I can use it. There is a law of mental equivalence, and I can use it. And so it is. So it is. Please turn within. In this moment, I am acutely aware of the power and presence that I call God. That power and presence that is within me and surrounds me. I know that it is the very essence of creativity, of wholeness, of perfection, of divine right action, of wisdom, of abundance, and of unconditional love. I know that right where I am, God is, in its fullness and in its wholeness. And just as I know that this is true for me, I know it is true for each and every person here today. Each of us is an ambassador of God on the planet, here to bring forward all of those wonderful God qualities that we are. And it is from that place of unity that I speak a word of prayer about and for each of us today. Truly knowing that we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation. That when we arrived on the planet, we already had everything within us to create the life of our dreams. That it is quite possible for us to remember that, to tap into that, to use it consciously. And so I claim ease and grace for us around that. Ease and grace around really doing the inner work to uncover the unconscious beliefs that we might have that might be getting in the way of manifesting what we really desire. Ease and grace around creating new mental equivalents and being able to stay with that mental equivalent, no matter what is happening around us, knowing truly that over time, the law works. The law always says yes. And that thing that we desire, that thing that is the exact replication of the mental equivalent that we have held so diligently, must be made manifest. And so I claim ease and grace for us all around all of this, knowing that we truly have the ability to create the life of our dreams, a life that works for everyone. And I'm so grateful to know this truth and to speak these words. So grateful for the power of prayer, knowing that these words are loosed into a law that only ever says yes, that they are clothed in form even as they are spoken. And so I speak them and I release them with gratitude, with love, and with full expectation of their manifestation, letting go and letting God be God. And I invite each of us to anchor this prayer for ourselves and for each other simply by saying, and so it is, and so it is. Amen. Thank you.